Hey, Damon.
Okay, we ready?
We should probably just sign here. Can I see you guys? Kim?
Yes.
Do you want me to move down one?
Or come this way, whatever.
Thank you. I just literally got it done.
Give my mind. I can move down to it.
Goes around.
We're good.
Well, if we all move down one.
Yeah, just switch me right completely over.
I'm sliding you down.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:31. We'd like to begin the meeting. If you could all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Again, good evening. Thank you for so many of you being here tonight. This is a very important meeting with not very good news, unfortunately. First thing on the agenda is the meeting notes from January 25th. Does anybody have any comments or concerns about those notes? Okay, moving on to why we're all here, the FY19 budget discussion. I will turn it over to the superintendent. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, town officials, please move up to the table. Yeah, town administrator, town officials, whatever. Take a chair, please.
I don't think I will, because you have.
We'll fix it.
So, as Dina said, the purpose of the meeting is, as they have been for in the past for district communications committees, this is an opportunity for us to get on the same page. We are wishing we had different news for you when we shared a memo that didn't go to you directly, but the memo that ended up in packets and you saw back in October from Michelle to the committee to provide an update of where we were at that time. Increases were estimated at 2.2 million, and we all saw those as unbelievably high. The news has just continued to get worse. So this is a year that I would say is the perfect storm of revenues declining and costs increasing. So tonight, our hope is that we come together to decide how to move forward on this as a unified front. These are obviously figures that cannot be absorbed without some type of massive impact to the towns, and we'll outline for you tonight what the impact would be for the district. So then the question is, what do we do to move forward so that we're on the same page and the towns remain healthy and the district remains healthy? So I'm going to pass the mic over to Michelle and ask her to walk through these documents. But the hope is that we have a public hearing scheduled. We added a public hearing. We don't usually do a public hearing before the tentative budget, but due to the extreme numbers we're looking at this year, we decided to add that. The committee decided to add that, and so that will be happening next Wednesday. But before we have a massive audience and parents and public showing up to talk about these figures and these costs and these cuts, we wanted to have an opportunity to sit around the table with you all as the town officials so that we can come to some joint agreement about how we're going to move forward here. So to start off, I'm going to pass the mic over to Michelle and ask her to go through outline the expenditures and revenues that we are assuming at this point.
Okay. I'm going to start with the landscape sheet, which details all of our budget changes at this point, and I do apologize to the school committee as they've already heard this detail a couple of times now. This sheet is broken down into 3 sections. The first section is contractual or otherwise required. The second category is cost avoidance with either a severe risk or severe impact. And the third category is very important, high risk or high impact. I should also note that there are low priority items that did not make it onto this list. We're obviously trying to be very conservative about what we include in our budget this year. And I should state that when we put this budget together, we had a very different message to our principals and departments. Normally they come forward with a wish list of what we consider an adequate budget. That wasn't the process this year. We actually told them to come in with a level service budget and essentially no increases to programs unless it was absolutely necessary or mandated. So in front of us now is what we have in terms of all the budget changes, and I'll walk through each one briefly. If you have any questions, please let me know. The first item is school choice and charter tuitions. These are assessments from the state. We really can't control how much this increases, but right now this number actually includes 3 less choice students because we have 9 graduating this year and 2 additional charter students. Our new curriculum costs have decreased this year. So that was basically the math and focus curriculum that we have paid in full. So that is not in our budget any longer. Third item is math consumables. We have moved those to the elementary schools, so we do not need to carry those in our budget any longer. The TRSH Performing Arts for $13,725 increase is actually not a reduction. It's not an increase to the budget. It's a reduction in the funding source. We previously have used user fees to offset their budget, and the user fees are no longer supporting their budget in full. So we're looking to recoup that cost through our assessment, or portion of the cost. NES classroom teacher is no longer needed due to a class size. The class sizes that will stabilize the number of classrooms for each grade. So we do not need that additional teacher. Pine Grove and Salisbury Elementary both require a special education teacher at this point, and that is basically, that is essential due to caseload. Right now we are not meeting our requirements. We're trying to piece together throughout this year, but really those teachers are needed in the classrooms at this point. General operations admin has a decrease of $18,550. This is because we are taking our payroll service to be processed in-house. We're no longer using a third-party vendor. Our utilities and facilities costs are decreasing. We have locked in our gas and electric rates at lower costs, and that is a reflection of the savings. Transportation is for our regular day contracted increase and a small increase for our homeless transportation, which is also something that we cannot control. Portable defibrillators, I'm estimating an amount of $12,000. This may come down, may go up a little bit. This is a new mandate by the state. It's a new Mass General law that requires portable defibrillators for all school athletic events, including sports teams. Salary steps and COLA for all settled unions is totaling $921,000. This number is a little bit higher than usual, but this is the contracts that were settled, and it's not substantially higher than it was. I mean, it's a little bit, not a heck of a lot. Salary from school choice, salary shift from school choice. Previously, school choice was able to absorb more of our teachers' salaries. Last year, we had a decrease of $100,000 in the school choice funds. I mean, this current year, we had another decrease of $79,000 in funding. This does not include any projected decrease for next year. This is the actual decrease that we have as of today. Salary shift from grant and revolving, same situation. Our grant funds and revolving funds being able to support salaries have decreased. So essentially, this is what we are short today, not projecting any future additional decrease. Our retirement assessment from Essex Regional Retirement Board actually was decreased this year, which was a very nice surprise. We initially budgeted or expected about a $100,000 increase. Instead, we have a $60,000 decrease. Very happy with that, assuming that remains consistent through the budget process. Health and dental insurance. Right now, we are projecting an increase of $301,000. We are budgeting an increase of 11% on health insurance and 4% on dental insurance. We're hoping to have better numbers in the coming weeks, and that number will not go up. It can certainly go down, and we're hoping it will. Salary reserve is 0.5% of our total payroll. This is for mid-year hires, mid-year adjustments, And we typically have that 0.5% of the total payroll included in each budget, and that totals $116,000. Salary for column changes is a contractual item when teachers and instructional assistants can submit for a column change that they expect to be able to have earned by September 1st. In terms of data, we really think, and all the principals feel, that these specialists need to be full-time. This is something we had in the budget last year. We also have it again in the budget this year. We just feel it's a very, very high priority, and really we need to find a way to do that. The second item is a specialized program for special education. This would be at the elementary level, and this would actually be a program that would be created to hopefully keep some of the children in-house that we are currently sending out for evaluations. And once we send a child out for an evaluation, typically they end up being outplaced. So by creating this program, we hope to maintain the current students that we have and decrease the rate that they're being placed out. The third line down, salary, estimated 2% for non-union members. This obviously is not contractual. It's not been negotiated, but it is being anticipated at this time. Certainly can be cut, but we'd like to keep it in. Substitute teachers, an increase of $51,400. That is based on the actual spending of last year. Not anticipating any additional increase, but we'd like to get it to a level of what we actually spent last year on substitute teachers. Intrusion alarm repair. At this campus, it needs some work to be fully functioning. We do have an alarm here, but certainly we want it working in the best manner it can. The high school, middle school stair tread maintenance. Currently, if any of you noticed coming down the stairs, we have, I believe, about 6 stairways that are in really tough shape for the stair treads, and it's really becoming a tripping hazard at this point. So we did receive a quote a few months ago, and that is $27,000. And finally, in this category is the Raptor visitor management software. This is a software program that would scan licenses for every visitor to all of our schools. It would check them against the sex offender registry, and it would actually create a sticker badge for the visitors to wear. It's a one-time cost. We think it's short money for quite a bit of security for our students. And that category totals $442,000. On to the last category, and it's still very important, however, not as important as the other 2 categories. We have IT general services and supplies, an increase of $7,215. These were all detailed in the workbooks for the 3-day budget presentations that the school committee heard. couple weeks ago. Newbury Elementary General Service and Supplies is actually decreasing $133. Pine Grove General Services and Supplies going up $8,154. Salisbury Elementary is increasing by $14,784. The middle school, $2,668. The middle school is proposing a Chromebook lease for 2 additional Chromebook carts. This would be for MCAS testing. At the current time, they are borrowing carts from the high school, which is a little more involved than just simply wheeling the carts over. The carts currently have to be taken out of use, put into a kiosk mode, provided to the students for testing, and cannot be used until the ending of the testing period, which does go on for days, many times. So ideally, they currently have 2 carts. We'd like 2 additional carts for that testing. High school general services and supplies increases $9,155. And the high school is proposing a Chromebook lease for the special education students. It would actually be a lease of 7 Chromebooks altogether. That total category is $48,112. So that brings us to a net operating increase in expenditures of $3,130,272. The next section down on this sheet is the potential changes in revenue. Currently, according to the governor's budget that was released, we are expecting an increase in regional transportation of $36,244. The Chapter 70 revenue is increasing $47,840, so the total state increase is $84,084. And it should be noted that the special education circuit breaker, we're currently budgeting or anticipating a reimbursement of 65%. We are hoping that actually goes up to 75%, which would be in the ballpark of $63,000 additional. So every dollar does help. So the summary of changes, if you take into consideration the current FY18 general operating budget, that is the current year, is $39,033,026. And our current estimated general fund operating revenues is $9,742,641. So our current operating assessment is $29,290,385. So with the increased figures in front of you, looking at an overall increase of expenditures, $3,130,272, with increased revenues of $84,084. That has a net impact to the assessment of $3,046,188. Potential FY19 operating assessment would be a total of $32,336,573, or an increase of 10.4%. Are there any questions in regards to the data on that sheet?
I was going to say, if we can go through that and talk about, before we talk about assessments, if we can talk about, make sure everyone understands where all of those costs are coming from. I think that's a good place to start.
Absolutely.
Larry?
Did Larry raise his hand? Oh.
Yes. Larry White, Raleigh Finance Committee. What are the town numbers that they have given you as far as what they could afford for Raleigh, Newbury, Salisbury, as far as budgeting is concerned? What are those numbers for each town?
The committee received one letter from the town of Rowley, and it was an increase of 200,000, I feel like, and some change. So that's the only documented number that we received saying this is how much money is available.
So you don't know what the towns can afford?
Aside from, we have Rowley in writing, we have not seen something in writing from Salisbury or Newbury. And historically, that's been the case. There isn't a document provided.
I find that disheartening, that you don't even know what the budget is that the town's can afford. Ms. Salisbury or Newberry have any comments?
Chuck DeKeesian, Town of Salisbury Board of Selectmen. We have just begun our budgeting process, so we're really not in a position to give you exact numbers as to what we can afford. But I will say this, we can't afford the $1 million+ that has been presented here on this sheet. So again, we've just begun the budget process. We, of course, have increases in our budget, some not controllable. We have contractual salary increases, health increases. So we can expect that our own town budget will increase. We just don't know what that increase will be right now. But based on history, we know we can't afford over $1 million.
Jeff Walker, Selectman Newbury, and probably Tracy is better to answer this question, so I'll ask her what the amount is. But historically and traditionally, we've always talked about 50% of new growth. So how much is that, kind of?
50% of new growth this year is approximately 300,000.
So Tracy said approximately 300,000. That's basically just to answer what Raleigh had said. You know, we always try to think of that historically as a guideline.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions on what Michelle has covered so far?
Michelle, could you,
Monique, use the mic, please.
can you explain the choice and charter number? Because I didn't understand how it got to 189,000.
Our costs for the current year that just came out a few weeks ago were actually higher than budgeted for the current year. So we currently have a shortfall this year. In addition, we know that 9 students will be graduating from the choice program. They're in 12th grade. Right. But we also are anticipating roughly an additional 6 to be consistent with what we gained this year. And then 2 more charter students, and roughly, it's hard to say exactly what that cost is, but it's the per pupil cost, and then we get a portion back from the state, which our charter revenue is very low these days. The charter revenue reimbursement, which decreases this number.
So the bulk of that 189, correct me if I'm wrong, is charter.
Yes.
Yeah. So the vast majority of that is charter. And so as Michelle said, there's been different iterations over the years, but the first year a child attends the charter school, the state is supposed to pay for 100% of the cost. Years 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The next 5 years, the state is supposed to reimburse 25% of the cost. So unless charter is fully funded, it's subject to appropriation. And so the governor's House 2 budget did not fully fund charter. So that affects any student who went there the first year, we're not getting the full 100%. And likewise, the students who have been there in their 2nd through 6th year of attendance, we're not getting the full 25%.
But yet we are being charged the full assessment.
Yes.
Any other questions? You want to continue, please, Michelle?
Okay. On to the second page with the green, peach, and blue charts on them. They are colorful, but however, they are not good news. Scenario number 1, if all items that I've just reviewed in all 3 categories were to be put onto the assessment, we are looking at an increase of the $3,046,188. And in the far right column, you will see what the increase in the assessment would be to each of the towns, and the increase percentage in the assessment. While that represents an 8% increase to our budget, it actually represents almost a 10.5% increase to our assessment. That is due to the revenues increase, the expenditures increasing, but the revenues not being able to keep pace with that increase. So this scenario would result in cuts. I mean, this scenario would not result in any cuts as proposed. The second scenario was calculated to roughly match the assessments for Rowley, which is the middle ground community for the current year, to roughly match what the assessment is this year. To put a what-if scenario out there, the assessments would increase roughly 4.5% on average. And the total increase in assessment would be $1,330,916. This actually would be a cut to our budget of $1,631,188. And down the bottom, at the very bottom of the page, the chart there, where it says scenario number 2, that would result in approximately a cut in staff of 36 people. And that is when we're seeing drastic cuts. We are seeing not just teaching assistants, you're seeing programs, you're seeing class size increase, you're seeing drastic changes in our school. Scenario number 3 would be to make our assessments or force the assessment into the ballpark of what Rowley had provided for guidance for us. So roughly a $200,000 increase in assessment would be an increase to us of $734,000, which does not even cover our contractual increases at this point. That would result in roughly a 2 to a 2.5% increase, or almost an average of 2.22% increase in our assessment. And this scenario would result in unbelievably drastic cuts of almost 51 people on average, because for every person that is laid off, we also have to allow for some unemployment costs. So that takes that into consideration. Obviously, the bulk of our expenses are in payroll. So we can cut certain things here, we can cut supplies a little bit. To really get to the numbers that we would need to cut, we are talking staff. And staff affecting every student in this district. There is not a single student that would not be affected. I don't know if there are any comments or questions on those figures here, but I think really we're looking for direction of how we should proceed, the school committee should proceed at this point. I mean, obviously, we know we're not in a good position. Last year during budget season, which was my first budget here, we thought we had a really tough year in front of us. However, at that time, I knew it was going to be an even tougher year this year, and it has projected to be tougher and tougher than even expected.
If I can just comment, so as far as the increases from the memo that Michelle produced in October, if you're looking at the other page, you quickly add up the special education costs. We were assuming $500,000, not a district. We're now at 854. We've identified the need for 2 additional teachers at over $76,000 apiece. That assumes a middle of the road salary and a full benefits package. So we quickly get to over $1 million in special education costs. And I want to make sure when we're having these discussions that we're arguing from the point of how we fund these, not whether or not they're justified. Because the reality is these are services and instruction that these students deserve and require by law. And ethically, we have a right and we need to provide those services. So I want to make sure that as we have these discussions around the table that we're keeping that in context, that I hope no one's arguing from the point of not that we can't do these, because by law we can't not do them, but also it's students are entitled. I also want to make sure that under the cost avoidance category, there's the specialized program modified. As Michelle said, that's a new cost of $160,000. There's roughly 9 students that we 4 out, 5 in the out. Yeah, so 4 of them are out now, and we're paying an out-of-district tuition, and there are another 5 who are in evaluation. We anticipate they will have the need for a special program. The current bill, if all 9 of them are out, is $495,000. If we can run the program in district, it's $160,000. The challenge is we can't bring students back to the district until we have a program to show the IEP teams to say, here's the program we have. It can meet the needs of your son, daughter, if we're talking advocates, attorneys. So this is an opportunity where we need to spend before we can save. So ultimately, if those 9 students come back, and we, unlike other disability categories, we believe the students in this category, we can convince them to come back, that we have a good program, and it's always better for a student to be in his or her home school. But that wouldn't, ultimately that would save over $300,000, but we have to spend the money first to build a program before we can bring the students back. So just want to make sure folks understand how we got from that 2.2 number to a number that's increased another 40%, 30%.
Anybody have any questions?
Dave Peterson, Selectman from Rowley. I guess my question is, and it's regarding the salary schedule under the new contract. And I wonder, when you were bargaining that, what idea you had of what budget issues you might be facing. And I ask that because Joe is chairman of the board. I've been chairman in past years, and when we start bargaining with our employees, we start off with, we have X, Y, Z dollars, and how do we divide them up? And from looking at these salary increases, I mean, close to $1 million this year with a 2% raise. Next year, you're giving out a 2.75% raise, COLA, and the year after that, a 2.5%. So these, whatever salary increases you're showing here, you know, barring a layoff of a lot of teachers, is just going to increase somewhat dramatically. I don't know how many teachers get steps versus how many get longevity. We don't have that figure. I don't know if you have it available, but in other words, teachers are getting a 2% cost of living raise, and other teachers, a lot of teachers are getting whatever the step raise is, 2 or 3%. So
In addition.
What?
In addition.
In addition.
Yep.
So these costs add up really fast.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering, and my question really boiled down to when you were bargaining. I don't know when you signed the contract, but you know, is there any potential that teachers, and I know they don't normally do it, we've all been there before, of taking some kind of a reduction in their contract to save some teachers or save some positions? And what's the scariest part is it's only going to be magnified in the next 2 years. In the next 2 years, we're starting off $1 million right off the bat before we look at anything educationally. So, you know, I understand the position you're in, but teachers they're making good salaries. I think I saw on the state website that back in 2015, 2016, the average teacher salary in Essex County, we were 5th from the top. So the teachers are not being underpaid. And there's a lot of issues that go into that about how many senior teachers versus lower teachers and stuff like that. But, I mean, you can cut nickels and dimes, as we all know, here and there, but it's like having a wedding. You want to cut your wedding costs, you reduce the number of people that you invite. And I think the only way you're going to come anywhere near cutting this budget, obviously, is to lay off a lot of teachers. And I don't know if they'd be willing to relook at the contract and at least save a few teachers or a few essential programs.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say before I saw you leaning into the mic. I know you wanted to comment. Just to confirm, the 2.75 is this is FY19 is the year of that 2.75. So this is the big year. Not the current year, FY18, but
Okay,
it's in FY19.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misread that.
Yeah. So that's
actually we got a 2.75 plus.
So that's included.
What's the average of the step? What is that? 2%, 3%?
Moving step to step, it's
Yeah,
it's not a clean. I would say between 1% and 3%, depends on where you are in the scale.
Well, I guess my point is, you know, and then I notice is a lot of for the teachers that are off the step system, that there's some pretty good longevity payments. So just something that, you know, I think you need to look at. And like I say, I realize it's not necessarily in your hands because they have to agree, but we went through a crisis a few years ago, and, you know, we're back to this crisis again. And the only place you're really going to save any money is, like you said, lay off teachers. And if they want to avoid that or lay off staff, it's about the only place you can go, unless they want to, you know, take some money out of the contract anyway.
I can respond to the negotiations. Paul and I were both on the negotiating team. The reason for the 2.75 for this year, the second year of the teacher's contract, is it bought us changes that we felt was needed for academic progress for the students in our district. Teachers are now supposed to be offering after-school help and notifying kids when that help is available so that so kids can take advantage of that. Our teachers are all wonderful at, if a child needs help, they'll help. But we wanted specific time that a child could just pop in and say, you know, like in a math class, I didn't understand what was taught today. Could you go over it with us? So that was hardly fought for, or very tough negotiations with our teachers. That's the main reason for this. We do have a lot of veteran senior teachers, but we've been lucky. We've got a good teaching staff. And I think I need to remind people that you had made the comment, Dave, that they make good salaries. Not all of them would agree with that, be that as it may, but they also have a lot more on their plates now than they ever had before. They have evaluations that have to be done, and there's more pressure, there's more testing that needs to be done. It's tough, it really is. We have not approached the unions yet. I feel I need to say too that we are also fairly early in our process for forming our budget, and we have never met and had a group meeting like this with such bad news. We felt we needed to bring all of you in on this discussion because I know you're going to say, and rightly so, if you are to support these budgets, town services need to be cut, and we don't want that any more than you do. So we're trying to come together to find out how we're going to move forward with this. I will say personally, even the budget scenario one, which wouldn't be any cuts, to me is not anywhere near an adequate budget. Nowhere near. It still is not meeting the needs of our students, and we haven't been able to do that. I don't know what the answer is either. I can tell you, as you know, a lot of you were there last Thursday night when we had the state auditor in, and she went over her report regarding the changes that are needed for regional funding of regional districts. We are continuing with putting pressure on our state officials. We are having an advocacy workshop on February 12th, which we have invited those other districts, Pentucket, the rest of them, that we invited to the forum, and they are positively responding to our invitation to come and try and get the regions in the North Shore, to start with anyway, and Narissa's going to be working beyond that, to get our regional school committees to work together to put pressure on the state. Something's got to change. I mean, we know it, you know it. I just want you to know that we're working as hard as we can. We are not coming here saying we need. We do, but we need your input as to how we go forward.
If I can just also add in regards to the teacher's contract, and actually all 5 of the collective bargain agreements. So we have 5, 3 AFSCME, 2 Mass Teachers Association. The committee has always bargained to be competitive, not the top. So if you look at Essex County, our teacher salaries are average. In the most recent AFSCME negotiations, custodians, we were a little low, so there was a little bit more of an adjustment, a correction for that contract. So when the P&N subcommittee goes into negotiations, they have data in regards to comparables all around the region. Neil Harrington was part of the teacher's contract. Obviously, that's the largest of them, and so as a municipal representative, he's been part of those negotiations, representing the towns. So there's whether you're looking at longevity or benefits or salary or what else is in there, whatever's in the contract, it's comparable. So our When we look at, through our public employee committee, and we look at healthcare costs or plan design, we look to be competitive, so we're going to attract the best and the brightest teachers who want to be here and come under our employ. And the same is with salaries across the board. So we want to attract the best teachers for your children, our children. In order to do that, we have to stay competitive. So I can confirm for you and provide information, we're not out of whack when you compare salaries. We're not out of whack when you compare benefits. We're slightly above average is where we've shot for salaries only. We shoot to be just above the median so we can attract quality folks. So that's, just want to make sure that was said, that's different than just the contract, this last contract negotiation, but that's been consistent throughout the process.
Brian, I'd like to maybe speak about
Jeff,
something.
just pull the mic up,
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry. I said, Brian, I'd like to speak about something that could be perceived as a third rail, but it is kind of the perfect storm this year. I mean, I was an educator. My master's is in education, and when I look at cuts of teachers like that, you know, as conservative as I like to be and try to have town services match education, I get kind of in a quandary also. So seeing things like this and understanding where we're going and knowing that money will be needed this year and money will be needed, I don't know if Raleigh's done it before, I can't remember, but might this be a year for overrides for education?
Would you like me to answer that question?
Could I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean,
Ra-
think about it first, though,
Well,
before
well, let me talk. I think it was 2006, I might have the year wrong. We voted in Raleigh for a $500,000 override for Triton. I believe the other two towns did not vote for that.
I can remember that.
Thank God we got that, because otherwise we'd be worse than we are now. We're in the process of, the last 2 years, we've gone for overrides. One for the brand-new elementary school improvements for $39 million. The taxpayers graciously gave us that last year and voted for an override the year before to fund the study for that. We've just broken ground on our police and fire station for another $12 million, which was an override. So we're strapped for overrides. I think Joe would agree with me that I wouldn't even dare go to the taxpayers and ask them for an override for. I mean, if we have to do that, we would do it, I guess, depending on what the school budget comes. If we get that assessment, we may have to do that. But I would hold out little or no hope. I mean, when the police and fire and the school addition are done and fully funded, the first year of those loans, we're probably talking an extra $700 or $800 per taxpayer, per piece of property to pay for those two overrides. About 3 years ago, we bought a ladder truck for $750,000 on an override. So I think, for us in Raleigh anyway, to talk about overrides is just not doable.
One thing that David left out is we also supported the Triton Stadium override, and we put up money for that. And we're not here. I don't think there's any town official that is going to propose what areas of your budget to cut. You have programs that you have to meet contractually. We understand that. But we do want you to understand that, as Salisbury said, they can't afford $1.17 million. We can't afford $987,000 increase. And if you go down to scenario number 2, once again, you're taking 100% of our Prop 2.5 plus our annual growth and additional monies. We can't survive on that.
Actually, Raleigh, that was very descriptive, and, you know, for folks in town politics, we can certainly concur with at least you've done a good job. You've gotten a lot of stuff in your town, and we're starting into a police station and hopefully getting our own town hall again. So, I don't know.
Well,
Chuck?
I just wanted to piggyback on Dave. We have a new library, we have a new police station. both of which are coming online in fiscal, the bond issue payment in 2019. So we went for an override for both. Our overrides historically have not been passed, and we're town officials. We kind of have a pulse for the feel of the town, and I would say that it's probably a 99% chance an override would fail in Salisbury, just to answer your question.
Marshall Jesperson, FinCom in Newbury. And we've been working, as the rest of the towns are, really hard to come up with budgets that we can live with, that can maximize what we deliver for our citizens. And I'm proud of all of us. We have done a terrific job. But this is a political problem that begs a political solution. This is not a solution that says, there's more stuff for us to do in the towns, so let's put all of the effort in the town. This really has to go back to the state, and it has to be something that we go back and say, look, other regional school systems, other school systems, towns are well run by people who, if you had to pay us, you'd go broke doing that. There's a lot of talent we get for free, and still, we can't do it. It's not as though we are asking to increase the services of the school. I've been watching them over a long period of time go downhill, not uphill. And to sit here and everybody's right. You know, the affordability of this stuff for us, we look at the taxpayer and say, it's not going to happen. But we need to involve our state representatives, as we had them on the 25th, a lot more forcefully in what is happening to the long-term health of the state, as shown in the students, because that is our future. And so I don't have the answer, but I think the answer is political, not fiscal.
One second, Alicia. I agree with you, Marshall. And we are, like I said before, we are continuing to have these discussions with our state officials. And that's not going to end. I guess my concern is, and Jeff, you brought up the big nasty word in the room, override. All I ask is that if we're going to have that discussion, I don't want to present that as an override for the schools. I think it needs to be presented as an override, period. Because we know from past experience, if there are needs in the schools, and that cuts into the town budgets, there's no way that it can't, so it's going to affect the towns no matter what. I don't want to have schools pitted against the town. I don't think that's fair to anybody. Alicia?
Alicia Greco, Board of Selectmen, Newbury. What upsets me the most is that when you have your school committee telling you that this is not adequate. This is not adequate for our kids, and it's not our fault. It's none of our town's fault. The fault lies at the state. They are walking away from their obligation to educate the Commonwealth students in regional school districts, and it's not right. And we need to band together with other cities and towns, probably mostly towns, in the Commonwealth that have regional school districts, and we need to roar. We need to get in the governor's office. We need to roar, and we need to get to the point where it's on the front page of the Globe, and that's the only option. The bar graph that Brian put out is telling. We need help. We cannot, none of our three towns cannot buy our way out of this. It will never happen. It will bankrupt all of our towns. And our kids and our people deserve more.
If I can just piggyback on that, as the superintendent, touching the third rail is even worse. So I'm not going to touch that one yet, but it has to be a joint effort, because I think we now have more momentum for regional schools across the state than we have in the past. I think the 25th was a great way to kick it off. Other regional school committees in the area looking to get involved on the 12th. But we put out template letters, and if the responses I'm seeing from emails and parents is, I'm pretty sure that our 5 senators and representatives are very sorry that they said they like receiving letters, because hundreds and thousands of letters, if it's what I'm seeing, is really true. But the solution that we keep talking about is two-pronged. So there's the meet your obligations, right? Regional transportation, circuit breaker, and then there's the long-term fix. We need a down payment on that long-term fix of fixing Chapter 70. So there's great progress there. And to your point, Marshall, we have to have that as a focus, and we have to figure out a way to do that. But if the state meets its obligations, that gives us maybe another $325 for regional transportation and another 60 some odd thousand for circuit breaker fully funded. So we're under $400,000 if the state gets to say, great, we met our obligations. The real challenge is reforming Chapter 70 in the formula. Hopefully, as a regional school, there's an impetus to say we don't have to fix it for 351 communities. We first have to fix it for regions. But a political machine will unfold as that happens. So my point is, we have to do that. I think there's good momentum and actual possibility where I didn't see any in the past, but we're talking years. In the meantime, this district will be decimated. And that's where I go back to the third rail to say, what I'm hearing is an override is the only way to make that happen, because you certainly can't just layer it in on the town's expectations and close everything in the town. So I would hope then that, again, touching the third rail, that's not our purview as administrators and as a committee, but I am fairly sure you would get a lot of support in that effort. And I think that if it was a Triton effort, not about the schools, but a community-wide effort, I think we could turn that tide.
I mean, to answer once again what Brian said, and Dina, not disagreeing, but I think on this issue, the schools at this point have a stronger ability to help us pass an override and should be part of that effort. Now, the other towns have gone through a lot of expense, and we're in the issue of going through a lot of expense, and like Brian said, if there isn't, and Raleigh's the only one that's have enough courage to ever really pass an educational override. I don't think Salisbury has, had they? Did they do it once too? So we're the only ones that haven't had enough courage, but without the ability to have that courage and go for that, it'll stay in the budget next year, next year, and next year. I mean, I don't see another way to go about it. The problem is, if the overrides don't pass, you're no better and we're no better. So, it's a tough
But at
issue.
least then, Jeff, the taxpayers and the parents.
Begin to know.
Exactly.
Yep.
And you would hate for it to get to that point where they actually feel the pain. None of us here want that to happen. But I think everybody around this table has to work together. And you're absolutely right. We can marshal the parents. In fact, next Wednesday night, again, we're having a public hearing of the budget. We are going to be recording, I'll be recording a message for the parents to go out Monday night stating we are in dire straits, and they have to show up. They have to hear, and I hope as many of you will be back here next Wednesday night as well to contribute to the conversation, because it will be a public hearing. They have to hear what the consequences would be if we don't try and fund some of this. Now, Freeman, I saw you were you trying to make a comment?
I'd like to, briefly, I'd like to begin just by thanking you all. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I fully understand. I'd like to make a statement first and then just a few thoughts. But I'd like to begin by thanking you. I know that you are advocating for the kids. That's your job. I admire that. I respect that. And I intently listen to what you have to say. I appreciate that you extend us the same courtesy and listen to what we have to say. I begin by I agree with Chairman Takesian, the town of Salisbury cannot afford a substantial increase in the Triton budget this year. That's not hype, that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. But I'd like to also say that, you know, when I feel honored to be a selectman, and when I was sworn in, I raised my hand and took an oath, and implied in that oath that I would be an advocate for all my constituents. And when it comes to the regional school system, when I look at you and I look at the folks behind me, I pledge to you that I'm an advocate, and I consider you all my constituents on this issue. You know, growing old has one advantage. You have a long memory, or at least I used to. And I remember the beginning of the discussion of the regional school system, and that we were cajoled, and that we were persuaded, and we were made promises. We were promised that the system would be more efficient, it would be more effective, and it would be more economical. And quite honestly, there's no other word. We've been betrayed. We've been betrayed by broken promises, and we've been betrayed by unfulfilled commitments. So I don't have the long-term miracle solution, but I will tell you when I left here last Thursday night, I did have some hope. I was encouraged and I was energized for the first time in a long time, because I believe that this report is seminal. I believe this report can have an impact, but it won't be if it simply sits on a shelf and gathers dust. So it's incumbent on all of us, and I know you've started that effort. It's incumbent for us to keep this alive. For the first time, we had a statewide high official advocate for us. It's the first time I've heard of that. And she's advocating for our particular needs and our particular wants. So kudos to her, and I thank her for that. I guess the final thing I'd like to say, some of it is repetitive, but for us to be we have effective local state legislators. There's no question about it. They are honest, they are hardworking, they are courageous. But imagine how much more effective they could be if we all shared our collective voice with theirs. Imagine the impact in the next week or two if the governor, if the Speaker DeLeo, if Acting Senate President Chandler all received 100, 200, 300 letters from the Triton Regional School District. They couldn't ignore it. And I implore you, or I ask you, to write actual physical letters. We're in the age where emails, you get a nerd to them. You don't even open them sometimes. You get 100 a day and you open 20 of them. Buy a stamp. Send a physical letter. Let them hold our tactile need in their hands. So I guess in closing, I would ask you to stand together, to hold together, you know, to have each other's backs. It's the only way we're going to be effective. And I guess, as Brian said, you know, we have a long-term solution possibly, but it's a short-term need that we have now, which is a problem. The only solution I see to the short-term need is that if we really put on the pressure, if we're really public, if we're really out front, there's always the possibility of the supplemental budget. And if this year, if you listen to Representative Hill, there may be a little bit of extra money in that supplemental budget. So I would conclude, I would guess, by quoting or paraphrasing one of the greatest presidents of all time, you know, a Triton district divided against itself will not survive and may not long endure. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Damon, did you have a comment?
Yes. One of the things looking at the budget layout is that I thought we had last year approved bringing the special ed in. I thought that was in last year's budget, so I was surprised to see it coming up again. And so I thought that was part of last year's budget. I was curious if there are grants. We've received a number of them for things like defibrillators that can be gotten for the school. I know that will not at all solve this budget problem, but we have been very successful in Newbury in getting other people to pay for things. because our residents really don't like doing it. And to go to the collective bargaining agreement, I feel like you may need to include in that agreement next year that they will go to the State House and protest on occasion, because we really do need this solution coming from the state. The state is screwing us all over, and they need to fix it. And the teachers have to be a part of that as well, since they are, A, the biggest driver of the cost, and have a union which is statewide and can rally a lot of state support. You know, I know both Bruce and Lenny, my representatives, and they will answer my calls when I call them, but I can't change them. And letters are effective, but we need a lot of them. And the teachers' union is a place that they can come from, and they need to be leaned on as well. You know, I don't know what the solution is for this. It's going to take a lot of discussion for my board, I think, to come to where we need to be on the budget issue, but pushing everyone from the teachers on down, I think, is vitally important, because I think you're right, it is going to be a long-term solution to this problem.
Alicia?
Yeah, Dina, you had mentioned something about a writing campaign. You have some template letters. Could you, I no longer have children in the district, so can you forward those to me?
Absolutely.
And I would like to modify those, and I'm going to share them with the rest of the members of the Board of Selectmen in the 3 towns, and hopefully we can start a writing campaign. I'm also going to go on the MMA website, and I'm going to find out what other regional school districts are. I'll call somebody down there who else is in the same boat as us, because I know we're not alone after Suzanne Bump said. And I think if we can rally with fellow, and I encourage the school committee to do the same at the state level. And I think we need to start agitating, and start to be a thorn in the state side and get in their face and make some. It's not going to fix this issue this year, but it might help a little.
Dean?
Yes.
Joe, go ahead.
Joe, go ahead.
As a senior, I've been frequently accused of repeating myself, and I'd like to do it one more time, that last April, we were preparing for our town meeting, and we were coming up with a Pine Grove proposal. We were asking the town to approve an override for a $39 million renovation to the Pine Grove School. And I'm a frequent visitor to the Council on Aging, and in going to one of the meetings there, several of the seniors were coming up to me and saying that they were going to support the $39 million override. They knew we needed to fix Pine Grove, but they were more than willing last year to defeat the Triton assessment for fiscal 18, and we're back again. We can't afford it.
Dave?
Yeah, I think being a veteran, and many of us have been, I'm sure, a veteran of fighting for overrides, whether it's for buildings, police stations, fire stations, schools in the past, town budgets in the past. I know that last override we had in 2006, if that was the year, we included funds for the library and a couple of other, I think the highway department got some money too, so it wasn't strictly for the schools. But the argument we so often get is over the years that, well, you tell us we need to do an override, but we don't see any cuts. We don't see any, and nobody gets hurt. And as much as I hate to stand here and say it, and I'm going to be the bad guy for saying it, but I think we need to push for an override in all 3 communities, obviously. But I think we need to go for scenario number 2 or some form of that, whether it's a little bit higher or a little bit lower, because I think when we're out there fighting for an override, I know in my town people are overridden out, but we have to show them that, yeah, this year we're going to lose 36 teachers, especially when talking to parents. You know, parents are the ones, I'm sure you people in the school committee get calls all the time. But until people begin to feel some pain, I'm afraid, in Rowley, we're not going to go anywhere. And we're in the worst. Obviously, we've been up here for a few months now, every month at your meetings, talking about our budget situation. In the last 3 years, we've put I think it's $1.2 or $1.3 million into increased Triton assessments, well above what we had money for. I mean, we've been drawing money out of free cash. Every time it's over the 250,000, we're taking money out of free cash. Well, that's a losing proposition. So we're desperate. And when I was here the other night, I mentioned to the panel on the stage that in the old days, when they first got this formula for the school reimbursements, they had a pothole fund. We need money from a pothole fund to bail us out, maybe even all three communities. I think Brad Hill mentioned that they've restarted the pothole fund again with like a couple of $1 million in it. I'm not sure how far that'll go on a statewide basis, but you know, all these solutions of long term are fine, and we need to work for them, but we need money now. I mean, we got town meetings are going to come up in May. We got to come up with a solution in May. I mean, I don't mind working on an override, but I think we need to show that if we don't get it, there's going to be some pain. And parents got to understand that, you know, if you want your kids to have education, you know, we're doing what we can. We're stuck. We got to get them to go after the state. And but we need to show something that will indicate that if we don't get it, well, you're going to lose 36 teachers or whatever. But it's a tough situation because I don't see how any of us can support, from the sound of it, the green chart. I mean,
Well,
if the overrides don't go through, we'll all be bankrupt. So I mean, we have to pick something in the middle, fight for that, and understand that for at least 1 year, we're gonna be hurting for student services. And but that's the reality of what we're facing here. And
I'll be the bad guy and say, as a school committee member of 13, 14 years now, this is the worst I've ever seen it. And I would still argue, and I know you're not going to like this, the green is still a cut. Granted, parents aren't going to feel it necessarily, but our kids are. And we have to come to some, we all have work to do, I guess. It's frustrating to me that part of my job as a school committee member is to advocate for the education of our students, and I feel like my hands are tied, and they're tied by the lack of money, and it's very frustrating.
Let me talk to that because we in Newbury did a study a few years ago, just looking at exactly what you talked about, which is people are not seeing the cuts. But in fact, because of 2.5 and because of how we have raised taxes over the years, we have not kept up with the cost of living. Year after year after year, and it's tiny little cuts, a little bit here, a little bit there, have, you know, it's slow starvation is what we've been facing. And yet, to say to somebody, well, you know, over the past 30 years, this is what's happened, but in fact, that's exactly where we are. And that's something that we have to let people know that, you know, this is the result of a long-term problem. And we don't have, you know, long-term we have to get the solution, but it's not easy, it's not quick, but it is real.
just one last comment and I'll shut up. A good example, 12, 14 years ago, we fought for a police and fire station. Our fire station was built in 1880 as a dance hall. That's how old it is and what kind of condition it's in. 12, 15 years ago, we fought for an override for a new police and fire station. I believe the cost
feel like I've learned a lot this past year in trying to bring a fresh perspective and trying to come up with creative solutions. But I think what I'm hearing for everyone, and I just want to thank all the town officials for being here, because I think this is actually, I'm really encouraged that I feel like this is a constructive meeting, and that I feel like essentially we all want what's best for the children and the towns and for our community as a whole. But my perspective, and we're talking about speaking to constituents, I've seen a lot of new families specifically move into Raleigh that are engaged. I think we are running off the momentum, like Brian said, of the event that we've hosted as a committee. We have already started a letter writing campaign. We've already shared that with the Raleigh PTA, with the Raleigh Moms Group that has over 300 members, with Raleigh Talk. So this is the time to fight and to capitalize on the fact that we can communicate with more people than we could before in previous years, where maybe it was more difficult to pass overrides just through social media alone. I can say, as a real estate professional, I've talked to a lot of great families that are planning to move out of Triton because they see that we don't have the funds for an education. So when we talk about growth, if we don't do something now, and I know this is a long-term solution, and this is obviously something that we're all trying to figure out together and fight towards, like one of us said, it's going to not only decimate the schools, but the communities as a whole. You're absolutely right. There's going to be no growth. People want to move to towns because of the location and because of the schools. No one is going to be able to sell their house. And families that have the money are going to move into other districts where they can send their kids to better schools. I don't want to have to move. I love living here, you know, but that's something that my husband and I have discussed, because we obviously want the best education for our children. If we can't get that, we will leave when the market's hot and get the most money for our house, and then everyone's going to try to leave, and all the prices are going to drop. So I know we're talking about raising taxes. There are people on fixed incomes, and I understand that. But we definitely need to band together, and I've brought up too, and I understand for budgeting purposes, it's not a long-term and an easy solution, but this is the day and age where we can fundraise and crowdsource. I'd really love to start something grassroots where if we can make up the difference to help the towns with the assessment, let's do that. I don't know how, but that's what we're trying to work on. So we're obviously trying to do the best that we can.
Dina?
Yep.
I lied.
Not the first time, probably not.
No, I know it. I'm trying to come up with solutions and listening to everybody here. We're all looking for solutions. And what I'll throw on the table again is, I don't think, none of us can afford, if an override doesn't pass, the green chart. I mean, I think that's off the table altogether. Worst comes to worst, Raleigh could probably come up with the orange chart. We'd be hurt. We'd take more money, a lot more money out of our free cash, but in the scheme of things. So what I'm wondering is if, when you vote your budget, when you put your budget together, yeah, it means a laying off of 36 teachers. Maybe a little extra money will come in somewhere, and it'll be less than that. But maybe if we look at an override and say, look, all right, Raleigh needs to fund that one, we'd need, say, 400 and, well, actually, without cash that's available, we'd have to have an override for $200,000 and something. That's not a bad override. Well, what if we fight for an override for $600,000 with the idea that if, in fact, the override passes, that we'll all get together and increase the amount of money that the schools need? That gives an extra incentive for parents to go for their kids. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if it doesn't pass, it's not going to put the towns under. In other words, if we go for 800, the top green one, and it doesn't pass, each one of our towns is going to have to go back and cut major services in town. But I think we need to figure out, and I don't say that my answer is the right answer, but I think we need to find a middle ground in which we can say, okay, fine, we need an override of X, Y, Z, and if it doesn't pass, we can come up with some free cash for another year. But if we can get an override of, you know, say $500,000 in Raleigh, and I'm just throwing that figure out, I don't know if that would be the right figure or not, we'll put that extra 300 into the schools, and if the other towns, it's a tough job to get 3 towns to pass an override. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the biggest thing from I think all of our town perspectives is we don't want to commit to a huge funding of the schools, and then we got to lay off police, fire, and so on and so forth. So maybe that's an idea. other people might have other ideas, but I think that a meeting like this is a good way to kick things around and get people thinking, and if, you know, something like that. But we definitely need some kind of an incentive to get people, particularly parents. My wife worked the polls in Raleigh for years, and oftentimes the old people, it's amazing, the old people come out and vote for the overrides. And the young parents are making $45,000 a year. They don't have, if they go a week's pay and they're in trouble, they don't vote for the overrides. Not because they don't want to, they just physically can't afford it. So, I mean, it's a tough situation. A lot of times people blame the old people. Old people are generally pretty good, and we can get to them. But I mean, you know, an incentive like that, and I don't, like I said, I don't know that that's the answer, but maybe something along that line. The towns are protected, and yet we're pushing to get more money for the schools and/or town services, however you want to look at it. But I think the incentive's got to be there to get parents out to vote.
Jeff?
Actually, I'm kind of framing this as I talk, and I think David put that together in a good fashion. But the regional school district as a paradigm is tough, meaning that each town is definitely dedicated to their elementary school. They think it's the best, and they'll go forward and stand, you know, tall for their elementary schools. And they also respect the elementary schools of the other towns. And I'm not saying that we get into trouble with that euphoric image when we get to Triton. Both my boys went to Triton. I was a band parent. I mean, we were all over the place here, but it's hard to sometimes market Triton. You know, the actual school building of Triton and the whole district as a whole, maybe what we're saying with an override is that we're going to have a lot of people involved in that. We're going to start to have to market this building, this new field, this core d'esprit we have among our kids here, because you got it. I mean, maybe these are the things going forward that's going to change how we always have to come to the table, because money would be no problem if this whole district could be funded like the way people feel about their elementary schools.
Yes, Chuck?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. We're already talking about an override when we've already said that it doesn't seem like anybody will support it. And it would be all well and good to go out and push for it. The problem would be what happens when two towns get the overrides and the last town doesn't. Then they're going to be, you know.
Up a creek without a paddle.
Yeah, thank you.
But also what David spoke to in the beginning, that maybe the peach line might be something to think about, even if we go for the overrides.
Believe me, no decision has been made on the budget, but that was my personal opinion.
Can I just go back and, I don't know, half hour ago or so, Damon asked a question, and just answer that question? Thanks for your patience. So the question was in regards to the special ed program that was proposed last year. That was not funded. And actually the 4 students who are out were the 4 that we proposed for that program. So they've remained out, and there's 5 additional. So we're proposing it again. Now the savings is more substantial because there's more students that could be contained in the single program. In regards to the teachers' involvement, I would say yes. The MTA, AFT, we're an MTA district, American Federation of Teachers, is the other big teachers union in the state. Very actively involved. I would say that the MTA and the AFT are going to be really good allies on anything that impacts 351 communities. Circuit breaker, need to fully fund it. Regional transportation, studying the implications of auditor bumps, it's just going to be hard because we're 53 academic regions, 53 and 80 some odd, including all the technical regions. So we're a small population. So those organizations tend to not put resources towards fighting those fights that only are impacted by a segment of their membership. So I would say they are active. I think as Freeman said, it's about taking that report and beating drums, beating people, whatever we need to do to make sure people see that. And I know our teachers will be very, very happy to be out there and beat the pavement, that's for sure. And then the one other thing, Alicia, you requested in regards to that email, I can just forward unless you want to do it, Tina.
No, go
that
right ahead.
email that went out through our system, I can forward that to the whole DCC group that gets the agenda for these meetings. I'll forward the email listing. It has a letter geared towards our 5 representatives. It has a letter geared, basically the same letter tweaked a little bit towards the 41 members of the Regional Schools Caucus, of which all of our representatives, except for Bruce Tarr, are members of the Regional School Caucus. That's not to say Bruce doesn't do his job, but as a leader, I don't think he can be part of that caucus. And then there's the contact listing with phone numbers, names, email addresses of all of those 41 folks. So I will certainly forward that around to everyone. But as I think it was also Freeman who said, beyond the Regional Schools Caucus, and this is something I've thought about since we sent that out, it's the leadership within the House, the state, the executive branch. It's not just the regional people, because the regional people get it. They're the folks who they live within a region, representation. They live within a region, they experienced it. We have a teacher who grew up out in Adams, Cheshire, and her hometown, they closed one of the schools, and it was one of the most horrific experiences. So we need to get outside that body of people who understand the problem, and to get to folks who don't get it. And it's smaller than just correcting the failed promises.
Brian, do we have those letters on our website so that if they are on the website?
So if you go to the main page under the news tab, I think there's one other story since then, but it's either the first or second story. It's the email,
Okay.
and then beneath it is a PDF of the contact list, and then a Word document. So you can download it, open up Word, type your own name into it, hit send.
Because I was just going to say, like Joe said, he spends time at the senior center. We need to get everybody involved.
But we also, adding to that, we need to maybe just send the link for the State House Senate and Representatives page. I mean, it's a little daunting because there's a lot of names, but maybe we can create a secondary list that's every leadership position from the governor on down with addresses, and maybe that's another dozen people that get as inundated, if not more so, than the folks we've already targeted. Absolutely.
The only thing that concerns me about targeting the leadership is that the pie is only so big. So what we're going to be asking them to do is to cut that pie up a little bit different, and give less to their constituents to give more to somebody else's. And I think we have to think long and hard how we're going to have to craft our message and what our ask is going to be, because and almost find a way to say what's in it for them, because the pie is only so big.
Absolutely.
Let me talk to that for just a second, because the Commonwealth looks at its resources, and one of the resources it claims and looks to bring people in business with is it has a marvelous workforce. It has a high education. It has a good place to live. Those things are the assets that the state has. If it does not protect those assets, that draw goes away.
There is how we frame it.
And I guess I would urge you in your letter to Governor Baker to simply remind him that he was once a selectman. He knows the problems that we face. He knows the shortfalls of a small community and its needs.
Peter, I saw you in the back. Did you want to make a comment? At the mic, please.
I'll go back to the assets. I mean, realistically, you only have...
To the mic. We can't hear you.
You only have so much money. I mean, it doesn't take an Einstein to realize that we have to have courageous leaders, and if that means even increasing the state income tax, I mean, it's a much better way to go than to have cities and towns fighting for each other and never getting anywhere because we have limited, like you said, pie to cut from. So if people want to be courageous, really, the bottom line is, even like if you took the state income tax and even if you increase it to 5.4, that would be like 0.4 times $1 billion. That would be an extra $400 million. And if the money gets truly appropriated for where it's, you know, for where the people want to vote it for, like for schools and for bridges and highways, I think it's a win situation for most people who live in the towns, you know? Because, you know, you're just constantly fighting back and forth and never getting anywhere, you know?
Thank you.
You know, one last thing. I think maybe the way to attract more people to the fight is special education. You read the newspapers, I don't care, the Globe, the Herald, our local paper, every single school system, whether they're regional or community-oriented, are being hit very, very hard with special education costs. I mean, just your budget alone this year, you're talking about 2 or 3 students move in from probably some other community in Massachusetts. That community saves money, and we're paying more.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I suggested the other night, and once again, it's just an idea, is, you know, if we agree if the communities agree to pay twice the cost of a regular student in special ed and the state picks up the rest of the cost, wow. And that would keep communities from pitting one community against the other. Who's moving in? Oh, you got a special education child. Oh my God, you're going to cost us a fortune. And it's really should be something that on a statewide level should be proper. And I don't mean the circuit breaker. I'm talking about substantial amounts of money so that these kids that need special ed and special programs, they belong to all of us, not just Rowley or Salisbury or Amesbury or whatever. They belong to everybody. And I think if we at least take a look at rounding up support for a huge increase in special education funding by the state, that might be something that we could get cities and towns of all sizes and all districts to sign on to, because everyone is in the same boat when it comes to that.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note, and Dave McGee is our special ed administrator and mentioned, and I've chatted with Paul about that, we've had follow-up discussions, is that the opioid crisis, we talk about putting money into schools, and Governor Baker is trying to find money to put in, but the impact, if you look at early intervention and students that are receiving services that are directly related to being born addicted to opioids. So we're coming up with a whole other bolus of students that this is not going away. And the reality of social and emotional disabilities is this is not a blip on the radar phenomenon. And if we're not prepared for that, this is where I go back to, you know, we talked, Dave, you had mentioned earlier about could we get the teachers to take a kind of a leave of that raise and what have you, but you're just pushing it off. So it's going to catch up, and when it catches up, we're going to be in the exact same. So we're kicking the can down the road, and that's not to say I'm touching the third rail, but we need to find a solution that solves the problem, or at least resets the bar to a point where we're not doing this every single year. And again, I'm confident the state will do something. It's just not going to be in the next 1 year, 2 years. It's going to take time.
Well, am I wrong, Brian, what Peter was saying? I believe there's a ballot question to reduce the income tax or the sales tax even more, so that if that happens and it passes, we're not only not going to get any additional help, we're probably going to lose some.
So the discussion about the millionaire's tax is it could raise upwards of $1 billion, 900 million and change. At the same time, there's both referendums. There's a referendum that would roll the sales tax from 6.25 back to 5, which the estimates are somewhere north or south of $700,000. So that's great. We get $1 billion new revenue. Obviously, everyone's going to earmark that. Everyone talks about education, but right off the bat, both of those pass. That billion becomes $250,000.
Anybody else have any comments?
Brian, I just have a question. When I know you said on last Thursday night that the governor supposedly put $100 and something million into education, and you said Triton's share of that was $43,000.
48, yeah.
$48,000.
Right, 49.
Has that changed?
No, so there's the other issue, and that was the last question I asked, which was telling to hear Senator Tarr and Senator Hill all talk about the fact that, remember years back, we were getting these joint resolutions, early resolutions, so we would know the number. So historically, it's been the governor's number, and it gets better as it goes through the process in the House and then the Senate. Never gets exponentially better, but it gets better. So the push was for the governor to include 100% transportation reimbursement so that regional schools, as a March 15th deadline, we're actually late compared to many. There are districts, regional schools that are finalizing by January 15th, February 1st, so that we would have that number early and be able to say, for us, that's $325,000, so be able to count on that early on. But, Senator Tarr's response and Rep. Hill's response that the concept of an early resolution is a tough sell, and it makes sense the way they explained it. But we won't have concrete numbers until June 30th, 29th. So we're guessing until that point. But yeah, so the number I think is 103 million and change is what the governor put in. It's roughly $20 per pupil. All we get at Triton, because we're spending so far above foundation, is the minimal per pupil aid. We get the $20 per pupil and whatever our 2,400 foundation enrollment, we get 48,000 and change. So our hope, again, the short-term hopes are, the push are up that minimum per pupil per student, fully fund regional transportation, fully fund circuit breaker. If all those things happen, we could get a couple $100,000 here, 50,000 there, but it doesn't begin to touch $3 million. No.
Anyone else? Jeff?
So, Brian, if you actually take what you said and think about it, somewhere along the line, it's going to be up to the people in the communities, the people that are leading communities, and the people that are leading the schools and the school committees to devise a way for us to be able to fund each other. Because I don't think if you're looking to the state and everything that goes to the urban cities and everything else, that we're going to have any other choice but to look at it that way ultimately.
So as a comparison with the chart that was passed around at the forum, so we had shifted from 34% to just over 22%. That green box takes us to just over 20% of the budget is covered by the state. That's not listed on anything. I just did that calculation while we were sitting here while Michelle was talking. So we would have gone from 34% in 2002 to now the state being responsible for just above 20% of our total expenditure. And we're still, with that 48,000, we're still about 275,000, a little more, less than we received in 2002 in state aid, dollar for dollar, not adjusted for inflation. Real dollars, $250,000 less, 16 years later.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. That's a disgrace. Someone has to say something positive. That can't be the last word. Anyone? Go.
There you go.
If you're a Patriots fan.
No.
We should close this meeting up quick.
Yeah, we better.
I think we're done. I think we're done. I gotta go.
Anybody else have anything to add? I would just like, yes, Larry.
I just want to add a couple of comments. It doesn't matter whether you're 1 foot underwater or 100 foot, you're still going to drown. We need to come up with something now, and it could be stuff that we don't want to hear outside the box, like busing people from Rowley to Newberry to make up classes, doing other stuff. We got to do something that's different.
If it's cost effective, most definitely, and we will look at everything.
And with that, I'll just say, go Pats.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight, and I urge you, please come next Wednesday night too, when we hopefully will have a whole bunch of parents filling this library as well. But thank you for your time tonight. Thank you. Good night.
What do you have? Should I Lysol myself thoroughly? I said, what do you have? Should I Lysol myself thoroughly?
The choice would be
Stop twice. I was counting.
75,000, that was
Yeah.
the thing.